Good morning and welcome to week 7. We are halfway through the semester. I'm very excited. You guys have come a long way. We've been learning a lot of stuff along the way. I hope that you are seeing the relevance of each thing that we have built on each week to continue to practice and fine tune as we're continuing throughout the semester. The topic of this week is rhetorical analysis. In fact, I will be doing rhetorical analysis for the next couple weeks, mainly because there is so much information to unpack about a rhetorical analysis and just analysis in general. Anything with analysis, it's basically what the word means, and you're going deeper. You're going beyond the surface of what someone says, of something that you've read. It doesn't matter what type of literature that it is. You're getting deeper into it to gain a deeper understanding of it. And so this week we are going to be focusing on rhetoric. Rhetoric is what someone is saying. And especially in the time period that we are currently living, there's a lot of rhetoric. A lot of people have a lot of stuff to say. Many know how to say it really well. But are they factual? Are they spinning it in order to gain their desired result? And that's where we are as citizens, that how do we receive that information and really learn to dissect it in a manner that is factual, that you're able to make sound decisions on whatever it is that you are being told. And that's just really where we're at. That's just really where we live in this time frame. And that's okay. You want to go beyond the surface. In fact, I think it's very dangerous when you get into situations where someone is just telling you something and then you're just believing it. We have history is littered with great orators. Some great and people who are noble, have integrity and character, and some that do not. The first person that always comes to mind is Adolf Hitler. He was a phenomenal orator. He knew how to work a crowd. He knew how to excite a crowd, engage them, and to follow him. But we all see that there was madness within his brilliance, I guess, for lack of a better phrasing, because he was so diabolical. And that's usually the question that follows him, is how could all of these people follow him? As history has unpacked itself, we see that not everyone was completely on board, but you get caught up in that snowball of emotion. And that's really where we're at today in this time frame, is the emotional appeals. And if we do not take it a step farther, if we do not go below the surface to really find truths, then we are no better than those that were leading into World War II and many of the other historical conflicts that we've had, and that the human race has put themselves in continually. And so we have to be responsible. And as I was preparing for this week, that's one of the themes that really kept standing out to me. Is that this is responsible writing. This is responsible communication. It's not just about, hey, I feel this, I'm going to share this with everyone, and if you don't agree with me, then you're the devil, or you're fill in the blank. And that's really, again, where we're at in society today. So we have to be very, very careful and responsible with the information that not only are we receiving, and are we taking at face value, or how we're sharing that, and how we're holding other people responsible. It's very difficult, and it's a very precarious place to be if you're holding someone accountable for information that you heard, but then you find out later that it wasn't accurate, and then it just really embarrasses you. And I think we've all done that. I'm guilty of it, scrolling through, and I read a lot of news online, and I'll get a headline and I'm like, oh, and then I'll make a comment without reading the article, which that's a shame on me moment, because I should have taken the next step, actually read the article to really find out what the content was. But again, I think that's such a great example of people who understand the art of rhetoric and persuasive rhetoric, and they know what those hot buttons are. They know that we are emotional creatures by nature. Every person is, and that we are going to usually have the knee-jerk reaction on emotion first and foremost. And so that's where we have to be really careful with that. So just kind of diving into this, a couple things that I do want to bring to your attention as we are going into rhetorical analysis, things that I need for you to go back and review if you're not completely confident on this concept. One is we've talked a lot about low, medium, and high level writing and what are the characteristics of that. This project, when we write our paper, when we do our rhetorical analysis, will be written in high level writing. The other concepts that I really need you to also focus on and maybe go back and review are your logical fallacies. And they are in chapter 26 under your critical thinking. In fact, read that whole chapter because this is such an exercise in critical thinking. When you're analyzing something, and that's also what I want to make sure, is there any really right answers? The only wrong answer is an answer that hasn't been researched. The wrong answer is if you didn't do your due diligence and to make sure that you were finding fact rather than just a verbal rhetoric or an emotional rhetoric. That's when it's not correct. If you are posing an opinion, if you are making a judgment call on information and you have done your part, and notice that this is a give and take. You have to do your part. You have to come to the table and you have to research for yourself. And that's why we talked about credible sources. You may want to go back and really reread those and what is considered credible and what is considered not. Primary and secondary sources. Where is your best information coming from? And so you want to review those things because it becomes so instrumental as we are continuing to move forward and really with the importance of what research brings to the table. It is really exciting. There's so many things that we can learn. Learning how to share with one another in a respectful manner. Again, we don't have to agree if you are coming to your conclusions based on the research that you've done. Also taking in personal beliefs because that's very important. And you are steadfast to that, then that's the correct answer. Okay? Doesn't matter what I think. Doesn't matter what your classmates think. Because we all bring something different to the table. We all have past experiences that help shape our personal ideology, and research is a big part of it. So again, this is about making sure that when you are seeking answers, that you are really looking below the surface, utilizing the tools that have been given to you and provided to you. Tools are useless if you never pick them up. And so this textbook, I think, is such a phenomenal tool. It really does go in depth with so many things and different perspectives. I strongly encourage you to go back and read. That's okay. It's not, one and done kind of deal. This is here for you to always go back to and reference. Go back to past lectures. Make sure that when we get into class discussions during the week that you are bringing those questions to the table and we can have those class discussions. So here we go and going into rhetorical analysis. And so I strongly encourage you to have your book open. That we are in chapter 14. It's on page 197. And you can go along with me because I'm going to be highlighting some things that I want to make sure that you understand. Many of them are concepts, how we're creating this. I still have those questions of, I don't know how to write this. Please use the book. Not only does it walk you through the concepts and the mindsets of how to create these things, but it gives you an example at the end of each chapter of what these things look like. And so, again, tools are only useful if you actually use them. And they're here for you and continue to go back. I am a tool where you can ask me questions, but make sure that you've done your part. That way, when we get into those conversations of clarification, then we have that behind us, and then I can really pinpoint what questions that you have so we can clarify those. All right, so here we go. So rhetorical analysis, fancy term, paying careful attention to how texts of all kinds, not just written communication, influences and sometimes manipulate you. And again, now this week in your assignment folder, we are actually starting you on some speeches. And so I do want to talk about that just for a second. I purposely left off the name of who spoke the speech, mainly because I did not want any preconceived knowledge to infiltrate what we were trying to do. What I am focusing on this week is with these speeches, can you tell who they're trying to talk to? Can you find out historical context? Because that does help. Um, what were the main points? I want you focusing on the content of the speech, not who said it at this point. And I'm doing that purposely. So please do not go Google and try to figure out who said what. I think it would just be kind of fun to see, knowing the speech, the clues that are in the speech, could you figure out who it was? And I've said this all along, everyone has a very unique voice in how they speak and how they write. And a lot of times we can tell who wrote something just by the verbiage and how they phrase things. And so I was just curious to see how many of my historians in class could kind of pick up on this. You may have read some of these speeches before. I tried not to get the super popular ones or ones that you may have covered in school, but they are different times in history, different situations that are going on. And so I'm looking forward to reading your discussion boards this week. Please be very careful and read your instructions on the discussion boards very carefully this week. There are certain things that I am looking for in those initial threads. Please make sure that all of those things are present. And in your reply threads, I've also been very specific in how you are to reply, and things that you need to be looking for in those initial threads that I need for you to respond on. Again, this is that type of analysis, and I'm trying to really laser point you into specific mindsets of how we're looking at material. So I thought that this would be a great way to kind of get your feet wet in our rhetorical analysis. You're not going to be writing a paper this week. This is basically really those discussions of how we're looking at material. What is the evidence that you're finding in the support, looking at the emotional appeals? There's just so many things that these speeches bring to the table. And they're famous speeches for a reason. What was the purpose? And that's the other thing with every writing assignment and every analysis, really, what's the purpose of whatever it is that you're analyzing? And if you can understand the purpose, then those other things kind of fall into place. All right, so knowing that analysis of arguments have become a common academic assignment, mainly because I truly feel that this is an actual life skill. Every profession will do some form of analysis. It will either be like a statistical analysis, it could be if you're in the medical field, analysis of treatment, analysis of trying to find a correct treatment where you're seeing commonalities within patients and you're trying to really go to the core of what it is the issue is. We have that phrase of, just band-aiding things. I think we see that in everything, in every job. Well, I'm going to fix this one little thing, but if you don't go to the core of what the issue is, then Band-Aids, after a while, they peel off, and there's not really a true fix to a Band-Aid. So when you're unpacking things and you're getting to really the root cause, and that's really what analysis is, it is to go deeper than what is surface, and to really understand whatever it is that you are hearing, whatever you are reading, whatever you are researching, to gain a deeper understanding. And that's really what academia is. It's just to really get deeper and to find answers and clues. And depending upon what your profession is, it will look a little different, but all of them have that common thread of going below the surface and finding what are those truths, how are you unpacking them, and then how are you responding to them. Again, one of the things with this assignment, as with all assignments for this class, is that you have to have that objectivity. This is not an emotional, even though you're going to read those emotional appeals, you have to kind of step out and look at it as this fly on the wall and the impact, and really can you identify purposeful actions within the rhetoric that's being given, and to find that purpose. And the only way that you're going to be able to do that is to stand on the outside looking in. If you have any pre-knowledge of any of the things that you are analyzing, if you put your emotion into it first, you will we're corrupt basically the true analysis and the true search for knowledge. Only when we can separate ourselves and really just start separating fact from fiction, and really looking at things, do those the truths come to light, and then you can make that sound decision. Sometimes it could be a confirmation of what you already know, but then you have that evidence to really support you going forward. If it's where you are changing your stance, and that often occurs, which is okay, and we've all been there. We've all thought one thing, and then when we really start to unpack it, we're like, eeh, that was kind of wrong. And so really what it makes us, or turns us into, is really that a responsible adult that, okay, I hear what you're saying, but you know what? It's perfectly okay to say, I just need to look into this a little bit further before I can really speak into that. And I mean, I say that, and that's perfectly okay. It's better that you research something and really have that confidence of, I've done my due diligence, I've done my grunt work, and this is the opinion that I have based on that. But again, the objectivity piece is really key, because only if you're able to look at it objectively, will you really be able to see the truths will really start separating themselves, the fact from fiction kind of thing. All right, so they first talk about the different types of analysis: discourse, critical analysis, analysis of culture, analysis of argument. You can analyze pretty much anything. Again, what I would say, because again, this is not the only class that you're going to have to complete an analysis in, and especially when you get into your upper level classes, you really want to make sure, what's the purpose of the analysis? What are you being asked to do? What are you being asked to analyze? And I cannot stress this enough. If you're not giving what's being asked, then you cannot expect credit for the work that you've completed. And I'm going to say that again. If you're not giving what's asked, so if they're asking you for a rhetorical analysis, I'm just going to be really extreme here. If they're asking you for an analysis and you give someone a compare and contrast, then can you expect to receive a grade on the work you've completed? You can't, because you did not do what was asked. And where in school, your worst thing is, okay, unfortunately, I'm unable to grade this because it does not reflect what I've been asking for. But in the workplace, if you don't give your boss what they're asking for, and if they're asking you to analyze something and then you come with something totally different, you could actually lose your job because you're not doing what's being asked. And then when you take it a step farther and you take it a step out, you wasted a bunch of time because you didn't look at what the purpose was. So analysis can look at different things. What are you analyzing? If you are in literature, we can break tons of stuff down. I can do a character analysis. I can do a historical analysis. I can analyze many things. So again, knowing what that purpose is of whatever it is you're analyzing. And right now, it's rhetoric. It's what people are saying. It's what people are writing. It's communication. And you're analyzing that. And to me, that's a life skill. All right, so the first thing is, really some of the definitions and really what we're looking at. Rhetoric is the art of using language and media to achieve a particular end. And it goes on, it talks about discourse. Discourse is basically the communication and what you're saying. An objective study of how language and other media work in specific situation and texts. It talks about a critical analysis, the inspection. Especially if it's critical, then you're actually bringing it more fine-tuned, and you're taking a very, very close look. Whatever type of rhetorical analysis you choose to pursue, you will find the following advice helpful. Okay, and that's on page 199. Again, what is it that you're being asked to analyze? And those things will come to light. And main thing on that is I want you to know the verbiage. What does discourse mean? What does critical analysis mean? What does rhetoric mean? You need to know those things. And the thing is that you're going to hear those words for the rest of your life. They're peppered in everything. So if you're not confident with that verbiage, please make sure that you are, because you'll hear it again. Take words and images seriously. Now, we talked about this at the beginning. Writing is very purposeful. Communication is purposeful. You have a purpose, you have an intent with everything that you say, everything that you write. Um, and so, wouldn't logic dictate that if we are purposeful in the communication that we are sharing, that people who are communicating and we are receiving, shouldn't we be very critical on the fact of it's not a mistake? Um, they're very purposeful in the images that they show. Think about advertisements. We talked about that when we were doing the logical fallacies. And do you think that those images that they put on commercials are purposeful? Absolutely. I don't know if you guys are old enough for this, but like Hallmark commercials. I mean, they used to be tear jerkers and they were just commercials, because what they were doing is that they were pulling at the heartstrings of, relationships between moms and daughters and dads and sons and grandparents. And you wanted to go out and you wanted to buy a Hallmark card, because they were very purposeful with the images that they were showing, because we are very visually oriented. We are audibly oriented. Just think about our culture now. And so knowing that we have a generation that is very visual and very auditory, then wouldn't you use that to your best advantage? And then when you think about that, and you know that they're using it for their advantage, then shouldn't that kind of be that little red flag of, I need to pay close attention to that? The other one that gets me are like drug commercials and, oh, this is a fix-all. But then if you really watch the commercial to the end, this could cause heart disease. It could kill you. It could cause suicidal thoughts. And you're like, what? But they do it like at the end, and it's, they have to give those disclaimers for legal reasons. But did you ever listen to them? Just food for thought. All right, so take those words and take the images seriously, because everything is purposeful. Spend time with the text, and that is so crucial. Not just in this class, but every class that you're in. If you're asked to read and respond to something, it's very difficult to give an in-depth response, or really even a meaningful response, if you do not spend time with the text that you're reading. So these speeches, I've placed 4 in your folder. You're only to choose one. I would peruse them. You're not going into in-depth with all 4. I would choose one that kind of strikes your interest. And then when you choose the one, that's the one that you want to spend some time with. So your first thing is you're just going to be reading through. If you're giving choices, you want to, what can I engage with? What do I want to look at a little deeper? Don't just settle on the first one. So give it some time. Pay attention to the audiences. Topic and audience, especially with rhetoric, really go hand in hand. Up to this point, one, yes, you have to focus on a topic. That's very important. And then who are you trying to communicate it to? But when we're doing rhetoric, it actually can take on a couple different roles here, especially next week, because we are bringing politics in it, because that's just food for fodder. We got lots of stuff, and also it's election year, and so I feel like that's a good life skill also. So their rhetoric is more, who's my audience, and I need to write something in order to engage that audience. And so it's almost this yin and yang of it. There's an example on page 200, and it was talking about President Obama and Senator Ted Cruz's Hanukkah greetings. And they both had different viewpoints. And I would like for you to read through that. Can you see what audience they were trying to attract? What do you think their purpose was? And how they went about it? They had a common topic. It was a Hanukkah greeting. But how they communicated it, can you tell that they were trying to attract a certain audience? So in this particular case, audience and topic really go hand in hand, and especially in politics. You're not going to give a speech to, women and try to attract women, and then use that same speech for if you're trying to get the Hispanic vote or the Black vote or the businessman. You're not going to use the same things because each group has their own um, things that are important to them. You're not going to use, a anti-Semitic message to a Jewish group. So you have to take that into consideration. Who's the audience, and are they effective in gaining that audience? Now, this is where rhetoric really does analysis really does play a role. Is that you have the vision, you have that audible, that verbal rhetoric, but then underneath of it, those things that they're verbally saying, it sounds great, but are they actually going to do what they say they're going to do? And that's where it gets really, really interesting, and research takes on another life. All right, so going over to 203, claiming a topic. This week, not so much, but next week, we're going to fine tune that a little bit. Done right, rhetorical analysis can be as important as the texts they examine. They may change readers' opinions, open their eyes to new ideas, or keep an important argument going. They may also draw attention to rhetorical strategies and techniques worth imitating or avoiding. And that, my friends, is where logical fallacies come into play. So, I want to make sure that you are bringing that to your attention. Choose a text that you can work with. Again, that is always very important when given the opportunity to do that. There will be some times where you're given the text and you're going to really have to get into that. Annotation on each one of these is going to be key. How in-depth the annotation looks will depend upon the text that you're using. If you are given a text that is supposed to be challenging, especially like in your upper level classes, and they're using that verbiage that's reflective of that, there could be part of that annotation is you're defining and you're referencing, asking questions. Again, purpose, 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 purpose. That's what your annotation is really going to be geared toward. So be very mindful of that. Choose a text that you can learn more about. We've talked about this. Do you want to know about it? And this week you are given 4 different choices. The first thing is, does it catch your attention? How it's phrased. Don't negate that. If it's a hard read, if it's not interesting, I did try to get different. I don't really want to go too much into it because that's really more class discussion on Wednesday and Thursday. But I did try to get different perspectives, and some of the verbiage is a lot different. You can tell a political verbiage as opposed to a military verbiage. You just can. So what is attracting you? And I can tell you, in my personal opinion, if I am reading something that has a lot of profanity in it, it turns me off immediately, and I really don't want to read anymore. If it's something that's well written and has that easy read, that easy flow to it, you've gained my attention. If it's not redundant, if it's just kind of unpacking things and continuing to build, and everything is just like dinner, So every person has different viewpoints, and things that interest them. If you do get that opportunity, always try to choose a text that you're going to engage with, because you're going to be spending some time with it. Makes it a horrible experience if you don't choose something. And do not wait till the last minute. It's very difficult to find something that you're engaged with if you wait till the last minute. Choose a text with handles. I like that phrasing. Is it interesting? Are they using anecdotes, repetition to generate emotional appeals, proactive? Photo essays, commentaries is more proactive than images. A print ad, that's really not what we're doing this week. Probably we'll have some next week. All right, choose a text that you know how to analyze. You don't always need highly technical terms to describe poor logic, inept design, and offensive strategies. So just kind of read through that. It really does bring in, to me, that piece of it is that first step. What is it that you're analyzing and that you can engage with, and that would be interesting to you, that you really want to unpack? And I will also say, it doesn't always have to be something that you agree with. I think sometimes that choosing the things that we don't necessarily agree with because they're uncomfortable tend to be more enlightening because there's always value in seeing the other side of any argument. There's always value in that. Even though it's uncomfortable to read and you may not agree with it, I still see value in that. And so I encourage you guys to stretch yourself. It takes courage to do that. It's very easy to always stay with the rhetoric that's comfortable, the topics that are comfortable, the viewpoints that are comfortable. To me, it takes courage and maturity to be able to see the other side and be able to be objective with it and to say, okay, I understand your side, because that's really where true conversation occurs. And that's where change occurs. Where people are screwing it up right now is everybody's digging their heels in on whatever side that they're wanting, and nothing's happening. It becomes like a schoolyard, you know. I'm just going to do this because it's the opposite of what you're doing. I'm going to throw insults. Really? That doesn't fix anything. All right, so going on to 204, imagining your audience. This particular section talks about ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos and ethos, I've actually heard it said both ways. I went ahead and put it in. How do the Greek people say it? Because it is Greek. It's ethos, if you want to stay correct to the Greek vernacular. So ethos is credibility. And I'm not even sure if they said this, but ethos, pathos, and logos, they create a triangle. It's called a rhetorical triangle. Hint, hint, hint. You want to know that. Okay? So at the top of my triangle, and the whole thing with the triangle is that it is a solid structure. So for my math people and my engineers, you know that a triangle is probably one of the most sturdiest shapes there is because of the pressure points, and they're actually taking the pressure from the other piece and that counter pressure. Check me out. And that's why it's so solid. But this is the thing. If any of those sides wasn't there or wasn't stable, what happens? Everything collapses. And so they use this rhetorical triangle as a means to say that these concepts of ethos, pathos, and logos, they're all necessary into having responsible communication. And you're needing each of these pieces. You have to recognize each one of those pieces. So we're going to break that down. You do need to know the difference between ethos, pathos, and logos, and really what is its importance? What is the role that it's playing in writing? So I'm going to start at the bottom of my triangle, and I'm going to start with pathos because I think that is the area that I think most people gravitate to immediately. And that pathos I equate with passion, and that's the emotion that communication actually, that's the draw, is that emotion. We're emotional people. If you speak well, if you're giving talking points, if you're talking to something that is important to me. So I'm a woman. Family's important. I align with Christianity. I'm a Christian. So things that are aligning with Christianity, that's important with me. Or religious rights and being able to practice, because that is one of our rights, is that we're able to assemble and practice our religion. So it doesn't matter what religious affiliation that you're with, but that's important. So people who are aligning with certain belief ideologies, you know, is that important? Absolutely. So family. I also work. I want to know that as a woman, am I going to get paid the same as a man, and have the same things that are available to men are available to me? And that's an argument that's been going on for a long time. It's not that I want to be above. I just want to be treated the same. So those things are important. So those messages are important. And so if women have different things that are important to them. Each community, I for lack of a better phrasing, so apologize for that, but has something that's very important to them. If you are in the Black community, equality, again, family, being able to make a living wage, so there's so many different aspects with that. The Hispanic community, again, family, um, you know, it could be an immigration issue that we're pulling in with that, and that if you are an immigrant from another country and being able to make that process easier for relatives who are trying to come to the United States, do you think immigration is going to be an issue? Absolutely. Um, if you are men, doesn't matter what color, men's issues are different. They're looking at the economy, and women do too, by the way. But they're looking at jobs, being able to provide for their families. Um, if you are in the elder community, are you looking at retirement? Are you looking at Medicare, health care? I think that hits a lot. So each area, your audience has specific things. If you are in the Jewish community, and with all the anti-Semitism that's going on, um, do you want to hear those messages that are going to align with that, with the capital of Israel being put back in Jerusalem? That was huge. It was huge. So different sects and different people have different things that are important to them. Stay-at-home moms as opposed to career moms. Again, they're different. Education, being able to have the choice, or do you have to put your children in public school, even though it could be in an area that really, or the schools just are not good? Should you be able to have that choice to put them into a charter school or a private school, even though your tax monies go to public schools? If I choose not to do that because statistically and all the reports, this school is failing, it's not, viable. I should, as a parent living in this area, should I be able to get a voucher and be able to use my tax monies to put my child where, they can be educated? Lots of stuff. And so really where that comes down to is just, you have to really start doing some self-evaluation and the things that are really important to you, and really make a list, So imagining your audience. So when you're talking, who are you talking to? If you're trying to persuade, if you are trying to inform, who are you trying to inform? Know your audience, because there's certain verbiage that you're going to use, certain examples that are going to be relevant. If I'm talking to a bunch of teenagers, do you think my verbiage is going to change? The message can be the same, but how I present it will look different, as opposed to teaching teenagers, as opposed to teaching college age students, as opposed to teaching adults. It's just different. And so knowing your audience, knowing what's going to be relatable to them is very important. Then that emotion of, okay, knowing who my audience is, what type of emotion do I want? Do I want to unite? Do I want to fire them up? You have to take your audience into consideration. Okay. So that's that passion of, emotion. People work on emotion, and you can get them fired up. Again, look, in history, it's just littered with just great orators that just knew how to really fire people up. People typically look at like generals. They have to get their men ready to battle, and knowing that not all of those guys are coming off the field. And so could you imagine trying to fire up people to go in to sacrifice their life? If you're not firing them up, what's going to give them the incentive to continue to move forward? So that emotional appeal. As a woman, if it's, the right to life, the abortion topic, that causes a lot of emotion on both sides. The right for a woman to choose, as opposed to, when does life begin? I mean, that just been going on and on and on. Who are you talking to? Because if you're talking to a group of women that are right to life, life begins at conception, you're not going to be pushing, late-term abortions, because you've just turned off your audience. And not only have you turned them off, you've ticked them off. And if you've ticked off your audience, you pretty much failed. So just be mindful of that. So pathos, that's the emotion that's going into what you're saying. It's the emotional appeal. The other piece of that is logos. Logos, just so you know, pathos and logos are on page 206. Logos is the appeal to reason and evidence. To me, I always think of Legos for some reason. What do you do with Legos? You know, especially if you're a kid, what do we all love to do with blocks and Legos? We like to build towers. And we realize early on, if we just put a Lego here and a Lego on top, and we just keep doing that, how long will it be till that tower goes bloop? Because it has no foundation, right? We learned that very card houses, right? The larger and the more solid your foundation, evidence, then your structure is more solid and you can go higher and higher and higher. And you're building this argument that is grounded on solid logic, research. This is your grunt work. That's logos. That's why I put logos and pathos on the bottom, because again, all these things kind of work in tandem. Ethos is the one that I put at the top, because that's a credibility. Credibility, can you see how ethos and pathos, can you see how logos and pathos really work into that? What is the credibility of the person that's speaking? It can be their backstory. It could be their education. It could be their research. If they are not the person that's actually in the middle of the research, they're not that primary source, they're a secondary source. See how I work that in. Are they using credible sources? Are they developing it? Are they looking at the whole story, or are they picking pieces and parts out? And that particular concept is going to roll into next week, definitely. Okay, so that's your credibility. So ethos is credibility. Logos is your logic, your foundation. And pathos is the passion or that emotional appeal. You do need to know the differences for that. Hint, hint, hint. Again, that's a part of the analysis, because those are the things that you have to pick out. Who's their audience? What's their credibility? What's the logic? What's the emotion? Who are they trying to talk to? And were they successful with it? And having evidence in which to do that. I just thought this was cute on page 207. I love political cartoons. I think they're hilarious. He's a fact checker during a campaign, and he just locked up, and he's like, they're taking him out on a stretcher because, pieces of a truth does not make it all true, by the way. And I think that's where politicians have really run with that one. They'll pick, they do not use their ellipsis wisely. They're picking pieces out, those sound bites. Media does it. Is it really the whole story? And so that's why being a fact checker, you have to be your own fact checker. You have to be the person that depends on yourself. And then knowing, and we've talked about sources, how can you get those facts? Which is the logos, which falls into, again, that ethos piece of it. Going on to page 208, questions for rhetorical analysis. You want to know that. It's at the top. Consider the topic, consider the audience of the text, consider the author, consider the medium and design, examine the language, and consider the occasion. What's going on? What world event is going on? And that is actually going to take place in these speeches this week, because there's certain things, and that is one of my questions. What big event do you think was going on? Some of those are very, no-brainer, kind of mentions it in the text. Some of them, though, you may have to do a little bit of investigative search, but I think you can pretty much tell what issues were going on during the time of those speeches. Again, you're choosing one that you want to analyze. Okay. All right. So it talks about organizing ideas on the bottom of 208, and it really talks about how to develop a thesis. And I really want you guys to read that and understand it. A couple things I want to point out. Don't expect to come up with a thesis immediately or easily. Do more than just list rhetorical features. This ad has good logical arguments and uses emotions and rhetorical questions. One, we've already talked about that. That's really a sucky thesis statement. Is it engaging? Does it make you want to read more? No. That's where your wordsmithing comes in. You can still get the main ideas. You can rephrase this to be more engaging. But don't just list. Again, that's more of a high school skill. And you really want to stay around. You can be more general. What's your end game if you're looking at that? But You can't get to your end game, and it's very difficult to create a thesis if you haven't gotten into the text and you haven't gotten your hands dirty with it. Just want to say. The facts should stand out. What is the strength, or hold them as strength for your argument? Sketching a design based on a thesis, supporting reasons, evidence, plan. Focus on the features of the text that illustrate the points you wish to make. You don't have to discuss every fact, and that's what I was saying. Usually when you're reading these, certain things are going to pop out to you, and that's really where the individuality comes in. Choose those points. We're not doing a line by line. And really what it does here, it says, like, in some cases, a line by line, paragraph by paragraph. That's going to depend upon the purpose of the analysis that you're being required. That is not what we're doing right now. Okay, that's really for a very in-depth analysis. What I'm looking for are those points, those arguments that stand out, those claims that stand out, and the evidence to support them. And so those are the things you really want to identify. All right, choosing style and design. Oh, look, the first thing, it says consider high style. Oh, but you have to know what that is. And that means, it says, avoid I and you, which is first and second person. This is third person. Objectivity. You're the fly on the wall, and you are taking this material and you're being objective with it. Tone is respectful. Vocabulary technical. Perspective impersonal, which is your objectivity. Impression of objectivity and seriousness, and enhances your ethos as a critic. If you get too emotionally engaged in it and it becomes more of this, and people do this, well, it's obvious. All right, please never say statements like that, because that turns off your reader. Like I said, especially when you're trying to do an argument. Now, if you're referring back to, as previously discussed, where you're trying to pull off that, but never be very careful with your verbiage in that you're not insulting your reader. Remember, when you use phrases like it's obvious, it's basically like, well, if you don't think the way that I do, then you're an idiot. And what may be obvious to you is not obvious to somebody else, because they have different life experiences that are coming in, and they could be saying the same thing. One of the biggest arguments right now is people being sensitive to other people's opinions, but are they? Not when you're insulting someone. You're not sensitive and you're not listening. Be very careful. Be very, very careful with that. Consider a medium style appearing in the public arena. Again, who's receiving your work? But you will notice one thing. Not one time is low style ever mentioned, which means there's no first and second person. Your verbiage will be different depending upon who you're talking to. So I'm just going to fill in your blank right now. If you're wondering, you're in high style. It's objective in nature, and it's academic. So make sure that your verbiage reflects that. And then it goes into an example of how the article and then the analysis, and how to create a rhetorical analysis. And so that is basically it on chapter 14 on how to do a rhetorical analysis. You will have a quiz this week, which means I am going to have ethos, pathos, and logos. I'm probably going to give you examples, and you're going to have to let me know which one it is. Different characteristics of a rhetorical analysis. What is analysis? What's the purpose of analysis? What are some of the strategies of analysis that you can go through? What's a thesis statement? High, medium, low. You are going to see a lot of these things piggybacking. I'm probably going to touch on logical fallacies again, because I need to get you back into, I need you to start thinking in that frame, because that's a part of the logos, and really unpacking things and getting to the meat of what the purpose is. So I cannot stress enough, please read your instructions. MLA. I may just throw some MLA questions in there, because it doesn't hurt to continue to keep you fresh and mindful of those things. Please go back into your assignments and read the comments. And that's into your annotated bibliographies. That's into your critiques. I've started in on your synthesis. Please make sure, go back into your old quizzes. I've given comments if things were not correct, if it wasn't blatant. I mean, still use your resources. If I did make a comment and you got something wrong, it was probably something that was very clear in your notes. But like on the editing paragraphs, I've actually gone through each one of those and have given those edits. So just be very mindful with that. And again, it comes down to responsible writing, and you want to know that phrase. If you're communicating, if you're doing research, then do it responsibly. What we have now in our time frame is irresponsibility in communication. If you are not giving people the facts, and that is even not just with our politicians, but also with our media. When they're spinning a narrative to meet their objectives, then are they being responsible? No, they are not. And so that really puts us as the consumer, as the citizen, that we need to take those next steps. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to let me know. I will see you guys in class. I am so looking forward to reading your discussion boards this week. It's going to be a kind of a light week, but I really want you to get into these speeches and just to really see what you can find. I don't know, I'll make a determination on Wednesday and Thursday if I do want a writing assignment, but the driver this week really is a discussion board, so I am looking for some analysis that's going on. Please make sure that you're answering those questions and responding appropriately. Okay, initial threads, the dates are on there. If you're a Wednesday class, your initial thread is Wednesday evening. Thursday, it's Thursday evening. And then your reply threads all of you guys are due on Sunday. So you guys have a wonderful day, and I enjoy having this conversation and to continue to have this conversation with you guys. So you guys be blessed. Bye.